Japanese 15-year-olds are now testing roughly 2 years of schooling ahead of American teenagers in math, and after 14 years teaching inside a Japanese public school, I can tell you the classroom has almost nothing to do with it. The real gap opens before the first bell ever rings, in habits so ordinary that most visiting Americans walk straight past them without noticing. So what is it that Japanese families do every single day, starting around age 6, that we quietly stopped doing a generation ago? The first time I saw it, I did not believe what I was looking at. I was 26 years old, brand new to teaching, standing in the hallway of a public elementary school in Osaka, and a line of 6-year-olds walked past me in white slippers, carrying rags and buckets of water, heading toward their own classroom to clean it. No teacher pushed them. No one was watching to catch them slacking off. They just did it, the way you or I would brush our teeth. One girl, maybe 7 years old, was on her knees scrubbing a floor tile with both hands, while she talked to her friend about a cartoon, completely unbothered, like this was the most normal 10 minutes of her whole day. I remember thinking, someone forgot to hire the janitor. I was wrong. Nobody forgot anything. This was the plan. I taught in that country for 14 years. I married there. I raised 2 kids there for a while, and when we moved back to Ohio, I figured the hard part was behind me. I was a professional educator with a graduate degree and 14 years of classroom experience. My own son would be fine. His name is Ethan, and in 3rd grade, he came home with straight A's and a note from his teacher calling him a joy to have in class. By 7th grade, in a public middle school outside Columbus, he was turning in half his homework, staring at a phone until midnight, and telling me school was, in his words, pointless. I sat across from him at the kitchen table more nights than I want to admit, and none of my training helped. I knew how to run a classroom of 30 kids in Osaka better than I knew how to reach the one kid living under my own roof. That is the part that kept me up at night. Not that Ethan was struggling. Kids struggle. What bothered me was that I had spent 14 years inside a system that clearly produced something different, and I had not once asked myself what that something actually was. Quick word before I go further. The old methods my family uses, there is more of it than fits in any one video. I gathered the whole of it into a book you can buy in our pinned comment below. The book is the long version. If you want it, it is there. I will not mention it again. I assumed it was strict teachers. I assumed it was longer school days or more homework or some cultural toughness Americans do not have. I was wrong about almost all of it. Japanese kids are not in class more hours than American kids. Japanese teachers are not, on the whole, stricter than American teachers. The gap does not open in the classroom at all. So where does it open? It opens in the 6 years before American kids even start caring about grades, in habits that have nothing to do with academics on the surface. I did not see it until I went looking, and once I saw it, I could not unsee it. Every single one of the 7 things I'm about to walk you through, I now use with my own kids, and I have shared them with dozens of parents I coach, and they work here in Ohio just as well as they worked in Osaka. None of it requires moving to Japan. None of it costs money. What it requires is doing the opposite of what feels protective, and trusting a 6-year-old with more than we are used to trusting them with. Here is the question I want you sitting with. If a country with fewer school resources per student than the United States can raise kids who are more academically driven and more independently capable, what exactly did they figure out that a professional American teacher completely missed inside his own house? Here's what I got wrong for years. I thought this was about discipline. I thought Japanese parents were simply stricter, colder, more willing to let a kid struggle. That is not it. And if you have ever met a Japanese grandmother fussing over a grandchild, you know warmth is not the missing ingredient. The actual difference is responsibility, and specifically, how early real responsibility gets handed over, and how much of it is unsupervised. Think about the average American 12-year-old. Someone wakes him up. Someone reminds him to eat breakfast. Someone drives him to school, or puts him on a bus with an assigned seat and a driver responsible for every mile. Someone checks his homework folder. Someone tells him when to shower, when to do laundry, when to put the phone down. By the time an American kid turns 12, he has often made almost no unsupervised decision that actually mattered. Every mistake has an adult standing close enough to catch it before it lands. Now picture a Japanese 6-year-old. On the first day of 1st grade, that kid walks to school alone, or takes a train alone, sometimes with 1 or 2 transfers, wearing a yellow hat so drivers and shopkeepers know to watch out for her. Nobody drives her. In many neighborhoods, parents are asked to let go a block or two before the school gate because the whole system is built around kids handling small daily risks by themselves, with a web of neighbors, shopkeepers, and older students quietly watching out for her instead of one parent trailing behind. Japan has one of the lowest crime rates of any developed country, and the whole culture treats a child's safety as everyone's job, not just a parent's job. That safety net is what makes the independence possible. Shopkeepers know the neighborhood kids by name. Older students look out for younger ones on the platform without being asked. But the independence is what builds the habit. Here is the number that started all of this for me. On the last major international math test, American 15-year-olds averaged somewhere in the mid-400s. Japanese 15-year-olds averaged in the mid-500s, a gap researchers roughly translate into close to 2 years of schooling. That gap did not open in 10th grade. By every account I have read and everything I saw firsthand, it was already visible by 3rd grade. Right around the same age, Ethan was still turning in every assignment on time. Here is the part that reframes everything for me. We assume responsibility is the reward you give a kid after they prove they are ready. Japanese schools treat it the other way around. Responsibility comes first, starting as early as age 6, and the readiness grows because of it, not before it. A kid who has been trusted to get himself to school, serve lunch to his classmates, and clean his own classroom by age 7 has practiced showing up and doing hard, unglamorous things without a reward waiting on the other side, years before anyone ever asked him to sit still for a math test. By the time academics get hard, in middle school, he already has the muscle for it. American kids are often asked to build that muscle for the first time exactly when the stakes get high, in 7th and 8th grade, with no practice reps behind them. That is the whole insight. It is not that Japanese kids are smarter. It is not that Japanese teachers are better. It is that the habit of doing something real, without being reminded, gets built years earlier, in places that have nothing to do with the textbook. Let me show you exactly what that looks like, piece by piece, because every one of these you can start using in your house this week. The first one is called Soji no Jikan, cleaning time, and it happens every single school day, right after lunch, for about 20 minutes. There is no janitor swooping in to fix what the kids miss. Staff called yomushiji handle the deep cleaning and the plumbing, but the daily wiping, sweeping, and mopping of the classroom, the hallway, and the bathrooms belongs to the students. A 1st grader might just wipe down a desk. A 6th grader scrubs a toilet. The trick is not the cleaning itself. The trick is that the mess in that room is treated as everyone's problem to solve, not one adult's job to handle. Try this at home. Give your kid one space that is entirely theirs to maintain, no reminders, no nagging, and let it get a little messy before they fix it themselves. That short, uncomfortable gap between the mess and the fix is where the responsibility actually gets built. The second one is Kyushoku Tuban, lunch duty. Japanese school lunch is not served by a cafeteria worker behind a counter. It is delivered to the classroom in big pots, and a rotating group of students, wearing white caps and coats, portions it out to their classmates using a menu planned by an actual nutritionist. Everyone eats together in the homeroom, not a separate lunchroom, and the same students who serve the food are responsible for collecting the trays and cleaning up afterward. The trick here is the rotation. Every kid takes a turn, being the one other kids depend on to eat that day. You do not need a school cafeteria to copy this. Give your kid one night a week where they are fully in charge of a piece of the family meal, not just setting the table, but actually being the person the rest of the family is depending on. The third one is Dutoku, moral education, and this is the one Americans get most wrong when they hear about it. It is not a Friday assembly with a guest speaker. It is a scheduled class period, right there on the weekly timetable next to math and science, where students work through real situations together, out loud, with a teacher guiding the discussion instead of lecturing at them. The trick is that it is treated as a subject worth real class time, not an afterthought squeezed in when there is time left over. At home, this can be 5 minutes at dinner, where you ask your kid what they would have done in someone else's shoes that day, and you actually wait for the answer instead of rushing to the next topic. The fourth one is the independent commute I mentioned earlier, and I want to give you the actual number because it surprised me. Researchers who study this found that Japanese kids around 10 or 11 make somewhere around 85% of their weekday trips without a parent along. American kids that age make the majority of theirs with one. The trick is not really about traffic safety, and you do not need Tokyo train stations to copy the underlying idea. Find one small, low-risk errand your kid can do completely alone, walking to a mailbox, handling a small purchase at a store by themselves, and let them do it without you trailing 20 feet behind. There is a Japanese television show called Old Enough that follows toddlers running their very first solo errand, and Americans watching it usually react the same way I did the first time, half charmed, half convinced it should not be legal. It is legal, and it works, because the whole neighborhood, not just the parent, has agreed to keep an eye out. The fifth one is the phone rule, and this one is simple and a little uncomfortable. Since 2009, Japan has had a national rule keeping personal smartphones off elementary school campuses entirely, and junior high schools kept that same ban firmly in place for over 15 years, only loosening it recently, and even then, only to allow a phone as an emergency tool during the commute, not as something a kid uses during the school day. The trick is not the ban itself. The trick is what that ban protects, which is a full decade of a kid's life where boredom, friendship, and frustration get worked out face-to-face instead of scrolled past. If you want one thing from this video to act on tonight, delay the phone. Not forever. Just later than you think, and further from bedtime than you think. Even a single extra hour of a phone-free evening, held consistently for a month, is enough for most parents I coach to notice a real difference in how their kid handles frustration the next day. The sixth one is the praise itself. A word you will hear constantly if you spend any time around Japanese classrooms or homes. Gambat, roughly. You gave it real effort. Teachers and parents praise the effort out loud, specifically, and they are far more careful about praising raw talent or being naturally smart. The trick is that a kid who is told he is smart learns to protect that label by avoiding hard things that might prove it wrong. A kid who is told he worked hard learns that working hard is the thing that gets noticed, so he keeps doing it, especially when a problem is difficult. Tonight, when your kid struggles through something and finally gets it, do not say, "Good job, you are so smart." Say, "I watched you stick with that. That took real effort." The seventh one is the fixed homeroom, and this is the quiet structural piece nobody talks about. Japanese students mostly stay with the exact same homeroom class, and often the same small team inside it, called a han, all day, every day for the entire year. The teachers move between rooms, the kids do not. The trick is that when the same small group is responsible for cleaning, lunch, and group projects together for months at a time, you cannot hide inside a big anonymous crowd the way you can when you change classrooms and classmates every single period. A version of this at home is simple. Give your kid one ongoing responsibility, tied to the same small group of people every week. Not a one-time chore, something recurring, so the sense of being depended on has time to actually take root. I have watched this same small group effect show up in American classrooms that happen to keep kids together for a full year instead of shuffling them, and teachers tell me the same thing every time. The kids start covering for each other before the teacher even notices something is wrong. None of this is really about test scores, even though I opened with a number. I do not care whether Ethan ever outscores a kid in Osaka on a math exam. What I actually watched change, once we started doing versions of these 7 things at home, was smaller and honestly, more important. He started fixing his own mistakes before I noticed them. He started offering to help his little sister with her homework without being asked. On a Tuesday in October, about 4 months into this, I watched him make his own lunch, badly, and clean up the mess, badly, and I did not say a word, and he did not ask me to. A teacher I worked with in Osaka told me something once that I think about more than almost anything else from those 14 years. I had asked her why the school put so much weight on cleaning duty and lunch service, things that had nothing to do with her subject, which was math. She said, "We are not raising students. We are raising neighbors. Everything else," she told me, "comes after that." So here's what I want you to do tonight. Just one thing, not all 7 at once. Pick the phone rule and push it back an hour. Or pick the praise, and catch your kid trying hard at something and say so, specifically, out loud. Or hand them one small, real responsibility with no reminder system attached, and let it be a little messy before it gets better. Put it in the comments below which one you picked, and come back in a week and tell me what happened, because I read every single one of these, and I want to know if it worked for your family the way it worked for mine. I am not asking you to hand a 6-year-old a train pass tomorrow morning. I am asking you to find the 1/10th version of that, the smallest real responsibility you have been quietly doing for your kid out of love, and hand it back to them this week. It will feel small. It will feel almost too small to matter. One chore, one errand, one sentence of praise said a different way. That is exactly how it looked from the outside in Osaka, too. 7 ordinary habits, nothing dramatic, repeated every single day for years, without anyone making a big deal out of any single one of them. Next time, I want to show you the one homeroom ritual done in the last 5 minutes of every single school day in Japan that took me 14 years to understand and about 4 months to fix the thing with Ethan that nothing else had touched. It involves a notebook, one sentence, and a rule about who is allowed to read it.